hello, Snippy. Oh my goodness, it's good to see you. Hello, Diego. You want to do a video? A video? Do you want to do one? No, I don't want to do a video. What's a video? I don't care. Hey, it's Rob and Diego. He's happy to see me because I just came home. Anyway, so I watched, his tail gonna wag through the whole video. I watched a few videos recently about the Berklee College of Music, my alma mater. Yes, that was before your time. And, the title is usually something like, is Berklee worth it? Is Berklee a scam? Is it worth going to Berklee in 2024 or 2025 or whatever? And some of the videos are Berklee graduates, or maybe people that went to Berklee and didn't graduate, but spent a couple of years at Berklee and got themselves in $100,000 of student debt, and then, are a bit disgruntled and are pointing out the fact that, hey, you have to take all these classes like conducting and ear training where you are actually sight singing. Now he wants to go in. Anyway, ear training is when you are sight singing, so you see the notes on the page and you're doing what's called solfege, which is do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do, and you have to sing them in, of course, the proper rhythmic, patterns and in the proper, keys and intervals and that kind of stuff. It is very useful and very helpful. Again, I saw a guy who said these classes were filler, they were a waste of your time, and it may be a waste of your time in college to do some of this kind of stuff. Maybe you should have had it in high school. That wasn't my experience, and I'll get into my experience. But in general, I found all the classes, very, helpful to my growth as, either a musician or a technician or just, to my life in general. Of course, you don't go to college just to learn how to, do one specific job that you can go out and make money immediately after you graduate. I mean, you want to be a well-rounded person. I had a great art history class at Berklee. As a matter of fact, a lot of people talk about this Professor Henry Tate, who was just very knowledgeable, and we learned, how to analyze a painting and the history, behind different artists and things like that. It wasn't particularly related to anything I needed to know at Berklee, but it was a very interesting class that I enjoyed. So you have all those kinds of experiences in college. And so basically, sorry, I was playing with the dog, but 3 minutes in, was Berklee, worth it? For me, absolutely. Does that mean anything in 2025? Probably not. But come on. I mean, I went to Berklee. I graduated over 35 years ago now. It's almost 40 years since I started at Berklee, and the world has changed. I mean, come on, think about it. We didn't have streaming. We didn't have MP3s. It was probably 15 years until the iPod came out. So back then, I mean, you had to be a major label artist to get any kind of exposure. You had to get on the radio. We had different goals, different aspirations. The whole system was set up differently. It was very difficult for an independent artist excuse me, to break through, get any kind of attention without the support of a major record label. Of course, it is very different. The landscape has really changed in the last couple decades, and you really can do a lot of this stuff on your own, and maybe you should, to some degree. When you're talking about Berklee, it's almost $80,000 a year now. I mean, you're gonna get out $300,000 in debt if you don't have student loans or scholarships or whatever. That's a significant amount of money. That's like law school money or med school money, like a real job money. And to do that at Berklee, I don't know. It's a tough proposition these days. Now, when I attended Berklee in 1986, again, things were very different. We're talking $4,500 a semester. That was for your classes and your room and board. So about $9,000 a year. Again, it was expensive back then, relatively. It was double what I was paying just a couple of years earlier at Michigan State, where I remember the classes were $750 and the dorm was $750. So $1,500 Michigan State was on a quarter system, so 1,500 times 3/4 versus 4,500 for the semester system at Berklee times 2, so it was double. Went from $4,500 to $9,000 a year that my parents had to spend. Now, I am very lucky and fortunate that, my parents could afford to send me to school and I did not need student loans and all that kind of thing. It may have, changed my perspective, had that been the case. But anyway, that was, fortunately the situation that I was in. So I got to graduate without a bunch of debt and all this stuff hanging over my head. I ran up a bunch of debt on my own after that. But anyway, so was Berklee College of Music in Boston, of course, worth it to me? Absolutely. But again, everything is so different now. Could I just go on YouTube and learn the stuff I needed to learn? No. I mean, I had no idea how to find the information that I needed unless some teacher was telling me. I could have gotten an internship in a recording studio. My job is to work as a sound engineer for various films and TV shows like The Walking Dead and Stranger Things. I do a lot of corporate videos, talking heads, interviews, that kind of stuff. But, I could have learned, on the job, and to a big degree, I did learn what I do now on the job, but I had the foundation of Berklee, where I went through the music production and engineering program, we call it MP&E, and I learned how to be a studio recording engineer. I learned how to work with bands and record music, and that was the foundation for, a lot of the work that I've done up to this point. I've had a few other jobs along the way, but the vast majority of my career has been working in TV and film, off and on, but, for, 15, 20 years, overall, working, in that capacity. And it's basically the stuff I learned how to do in Berklee in, the mid-'80s to the late 80s. 86 to 89 was when I attended. I went 3.5 years. I had 2 years of college at Michigan State. Before that, I was able to pass out of a few classes. I didn't have to take English and things like that. I had to retake math because it was just not my strong suit. So I had to take, remedial math again, probably at Michigan State, and then again at Berklee. But, you learned a lot of the soft skills at Berklee. For me, I was not a real outgoing kid. I was not an extrovert. Berklee really taught me to interface with different people. You were doing project-based learning. You were doing recording sessions. You had to arrange musicians. You had to get the music together and, do musical arrangements. And you had to know how to, engineer in the studio and run the soundboards and do the recording. And then you had to know how to do editing. And, so all these different skills had to come together. It involved a lot of different people, just scheduling different times so that people would show up at the right time and come to your session. Berklee, you would run till 2 a.m. and you would start at like 8 a.m. So you could have an early morning session, you could have a late night session. They went not 24/7, but they went a good majority of the time. They were just pumping people through those studios. The studio space was a limited resource, and they just had to make the best of it and pack people in there. Anyway, so how did I get interested in Berklee? I've always loved music. I used to fall asleep with the radio under my pillow, and I just went into this magical world of these songs, and I just was hooked. I started collecting records. I bought music all the way back from the 8-track days and cassettes and all the different formats. And in high school, I got interested in radio production. We had a radio station at our high school that was probably pretty much, the springboard for my entire career. Was working at the high school radio station, first as a disc jockey. Then I worked as the music director. I got to put the format together and schedule everything and, figure out what records we were playing. I had to purchase the records or get the records donated to the school. And then the last year I was the operations manager. I was, overseeing the entire operation of our high school radio station, WOPR, Park, Michigan. And that got me interested not only in being a DJ, which was fun or whatever, or the music side of it, but I was interested in the production side of it, and how you put together promos. And back then it was done on reel-to-reel tape, and how you do editing, and how you splice things together, and, how you record things and, get the right level so things aren't distorted or too quiet or whatever. So I started to learn all about that stuff. And then when I started at Michigan State, the first summer I had a job, I had a very musical summer. I had a job interning at a recording studio in the morning, and then at night I worked for Pine Knob Concert Theater. I was an usher for the concerts happening at this amphitheater in Michigan. So it was a very fitting, summer for me, and working as an intern in the recording studio got me very interested in working in recording studios and how music was recorded, learning all that stuff. And then my second year at Michigan State University, I was still involved in the radio station, also involved in the concert promotion, and was working in a similar capacity, working for the concert promoter, being on stage, helping the artists and that kind of stuff, and taking tickets and whatever needs to happen at a concert. But I also started taking music theory, and I took 3 quarters of just basic music theory, how you make chords, and what's a augmented chord, what's a diminished chord, just the basics, the building blocks of music. And I had music classes in high school or all the way through back to elementary school or whatever, but since I played guitar, I never really had been in the jazz band. I never really had that formal music, education that a lot of people at Berklee had. So I did not have that background. I did not sit around and read horn charts and, do all that kind of stuff that was really helpful to people going into Berklee. So anyway, I got interested just in music theory. I really enjoyed these classes. And at that point, it was my second year at Michigan State, and it was a no preference major. I really had no idea what I wanted to do, and I had to quickly decide something. You couldn't be a no preference major in your junior year. And I saw a little ad in Rolling Stone magazine for Berklee College of Music. I said, all right, that's what I want to do. I've worked in recording studios, and I'm a guitar player and a songwriter, and I played in bands, and I worked at my high school radio station, I worked for concert promotion, I did all this stuff, this is what makes sense to me. And again, back then, there were books and a few things around, and I had read them, but there really was no great convenient way to get knowledge beyond going to a school which would teach you how to do all this stuff. Today, of course, very different. You can figure out anything you want on YouTube, but so we drove out, my folks, went with me. I had the orientation and I met with an advisor and learned about, the school. Let me let him to the house. Okay, go see what it is. Go see. Yeah, go find out. All right, so I met with an advisor. We drove out to Boston. And I think my folks were pretty leery, they didn't really know anything about the music industry. And nobody in my family really plays an instrument or had any background, in this area. They were really, unsure and just didn't have a lot of, facts one way or the other to making a decision on. For me, I knew that's what I wanted to do. I mean, I saw people walking around with guitars and people practicing, piano in the practice rooms, and drummers, and all these people going in and out and whatever, and this is where I need to be. So I did apply and was accepted. Now back then, Berklee, very different. You did not need to audition. You did not need to prepare a piece. I had a very rudimentary ability to read notes, as far as I knew I could look at a staff and say this was a C or this was a G or whatever, but as far as playing guitar along to music, I could do it very haltingly, very tentatively, but certainly not to any, great technical extent. And was a big challenge my first year at Berklee, because at Berklee, you need to have a major instrument. Mine was guitar. You need to, be a singer or a piano player or a bass player, or you play saxophone or whatever. Even if you want to do something not related to performance at Berklee, you still need to have an instrument. So mine was guitar, of course. I had been playing guitar since, I was, 12. So by then, when I got into Berklee, I was, 18, 19 already. So, I had a, pretty good ability to, play along to songs and do that kind of stuff on the guitar, but no real formal musical knowledge at all. It was a real struggle. I mean, I had classes where I had to sight read pieces. I had to read them off of paper, without preparing them. I had to do them on the fly. It's one thing to know where the notes are and things and have a general idea of how, music works. It's another thing to do in a performance setting. I remember I got like a D- my first time. I had to sight read, in a midterm, and I really had to work hard to improve, and I squeaked by, but it was never anything I was great at. Reading the notes is one thing, but reading the rhythms correctly, knowing how the actual rhythm goes, that's again a part of this class ear training you take when you have to read off rhythms on a piece of paper, da 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 da, or whatever it is. You had to know how to read the rhythmic notation as well as just the notation as far as what notes there were. So anyway, it was all new to me, basically. It was a big challenge. And then on top of that, I was trying to keep my grades up so I could be accepted to the program I was interested in, which was the music production and engineering program, the studio program. I was accepted, and I did get in my first quarter, I 2-5'd everything. I got, right across the board. I got, 2.5, like a C+ or something or other. And I was on academic probation. So all right, now I'm screwed because I'm struggling on my instrument to keep up with what they call these proficiency levels. You have to know how to do X, Y, Z, whatever at certain times. So I was struggling to do that. At the same time, I was learning all this new stuff about working in recording studios and whatever. So I did pull it together and I did improve. And I also took a couple easy classes like the history of rock and roll just to make sure I get a 4.0 in something. But anyway, I've been going on for a while, and I would just say my experience at Berklee was great. It was the foundation for a big portion of my career. The experiences of just improving on my instrument, learning how to work in the recording studio, learning the technology and the different recording techniques and about microphones and sound waves and the theory behind it and all that kind of stuff. And, interfacing with all the creative people who were around, whether they were a songwriter, a musician, an engineer, whatever it was. So, had some great professors. We saw some great musical performances. Just going to school in Boston is great because, of course, it's a wonderful college town and there's all sorts of, young people around, and you didn't need a car. You could ride the subway. So, a lot of those things are still true today. So, was Berklee worth it for me? Absolutely. I don't know what else I would have done at the time. Maybe it would have been nice to go to law school or something and, not have all the career drama I've had in my life. But, you can see, the building blocks and why I ended up there. And at the time, like I said, it was, a good move for me. And of course, I did get a bachelor's degree out of it that, my parents would not have let me go to school there if I wasn't at least going to get a bachelor's degree out of the deal. So I did, and it was a bit more expensive than it would have been at Michigan State, but I got specific knowledge that I was then able to apply. I did work as a music, sound engineer for a couple of years, and then I discovered the film and TV business. I just enjoyed that more. The technical challenges were actually a lot less, even back then. We were still recording on portable tape decks that ran on D-cell batteries. You didn't need a whole bunch of equipment, and you could go out and say you were a movie sound mixer. So that's how it all began for me back in the 90s. But of course, it's all, based on the things I learned at Berklee, the, confidence I gained from, working through problems I had and trying to improve myself musically and learn about, the technical side of the industry that I was interested in. And so yeah, for me, absolutely 100% worth it. I have great memories. I have really nothing bad to say about it at all. It was pretty much, exactly what I needed at the time and what I expected. Now, fast forward 40 years, is it worth it today? Again, it's such a different landscape now. I mean, if you want to be a musician, should you go to Berklee? There are other ways to, ply your craft and get in a band or, just learn on your own. And it's a very expensive way to learn things that you could definitely learn, in a different setting. You take private instrument lessons at Berklee, but they're like $150 an hour. It's part of your program. You obviously could take private lessons a lot cheaper somewhere else. So, Berklee is probably worthwhile if you are going into certain majors where there is a future, earning potential. Maybe that might be teaching or music therapy, or, you could work as a film composer, arranging something, on the more formal side of music, jazz, classical, that type of thing. But for me, just a guy who, loved bands like The Clash and wanted to just be in a rock and roll band and play our 3-chord songs, it's a lot of money to spend on something like that today. But hey, I understand the attraction. The program is very much expanded from when I went. The facilities are very much expanded. Berklee has a skyscraper now. We didn't have that at all. All of Berklee basically was in one building back then. Now it is spread out on a campus, more or less. And you have way more amenities. There's edible food now. So, there are a lot of things going for it. Again, it's very expensive. And, is it worth it today if you're a person considering? Well, I guess it depends what you think you're going to be able to get out of it and what your other options are for learning the same type of material somewhere else. Again, for me, I had no idea what my other options were. There were very few schools where you could learn how to be a recording engineer. I'm sure there were correspondence courses or courses you could take that were 10 weeks or something or other, but, very few places where you could get a bachelor's degree, learn how to do what I wanted to do, which was be a sound engineer and get a serious, background in music and, your particular instrument as well, and just learning about music in general. So I'm going to stop rattling on here. But anyway, it's a decision that, like I said, is very difficult to, for me to, advise anyone on today. I came from a different world. 40 years ago, it was so different. Your options were different. What we understood was different. Your access to information was so different. And now, of course, it's all at your fingertips, but, it is definitely, not something to take lightly. It is very expensive to go to Berklee now. It was expensive back then. I think, I don't think it's kept up with inflation or whatever. It's significantly more, even than it was back then. And, so that's my experience at the Berklee College of Music in Boston. All right. Thank you for sticking through this if you have at all. Just rambling on about the good old days. But, all right. Appreciate you watching as always. Thanks. Bye.